Hello, this is the Scourge Warlock, Singood from Neverwinter. Thank you all for watching my Dracolich and Castle Never solo video. This is actually a response video to the build and feature setup in that video. Today I'm going to be going through the gear I used and the features I used to achieve the finish of that dungeon. Alright, so the first thing I will go through is gear. So I decided to use 5 pieces of purple gear and 7 pieces of blue gear. What I used was, the Accursed Diabolist 5-piece, and my Pact Blade, I believe was the Pact Blade of the Dread Legion. That is currently in my bank, so I can't show you. And right here is the blue gear that I used. If you notice, all my blue gear has defense and movement on it, and defense slots. That's because I was trying to go for a little bit of a higher tankiness, because most of the damage from the Scourge Warlock coming from encounters also comes from the Accursed Diabolist 4-piece set. So as you see, that has defense, HP, this has deflection, defense on it, the shirt does, the pants have power, armor pen, defense, deflection with a defense slot, the necklace has hit points, defense, and the rings have defense movement with defense slots. The dungeon took me about an hour and 10 minutes to complete solo, and what I also used was I used these 3 artifacts. The reason why I use these because they give me some hit points and defense, and the reason why I used legendary artifacts is because it was a balance between the blue gear that I was using on my right side with the artifacts, because I was trying to show that even though I have legendary artifacts, that casual players can still do this if they have purple gear and purple artifacts, because my gear score ended up being about 16.6 thousand. So yeah, that was the gear that I used. I used the Accursed Diabolist, and the reason why the Accursed Diabolist is so good is because the 4-piece set bonus says that your encounter powers trigger a Hellfire on foes. Hellfire lasts 6 seconds, and when it expires, they take 3% of their max HP and damage, and it cannot exceed 2,000. Well, most of the enemies in dungeons have over that threshold of HP, so they're going to take 2,000 damage, and that set bonus triggers on every dot from encounter powers. So if you hit someone 10 times with Dread Theft, they're going to take 20,000 damage just from the Accursed Diabolist set. Also, okay, now we go over powers. I was using Essence Defiler, and Essence Defiler comes from the Soulbinder pathway. I am a Soulbinder Warlock, and some of the differences in Soulbinder is they have a better encounter power called Soul Scorch, and it does a fair amount of damage. It has a long cast time, but does a fair amount of damage, and it costs Soul Sparks to use. Soul Sparks come from doing critical strikes, or they come from attacking enemies with this at will. The other at will I was using was Dark Spiral Aura, which you get 1 spiral every time you kill an enemy, and you can have 3 spirals max, and when you deal damage with it, it builds a little bit more action points. It's not really noticeable, but it gives you about 5% action points for using that at will on a target. My class features, I used Shadow Walk for the extra sprint, so I can move 20 or 30% faster while sprinting, and then my other class feature was Borrowed Time. While you have Soul Sparks, they heal you for 2%, or they heal you for 0.8% of your max HP per Soul Spark every 2 seconds. So that's 0.08, 0.08, 0.08. That's 0.24 times 30, which is somewhere like 7.4%. So I don't know. So 7.4% of my max health in the dungeon. I believe I was running around 36,000 health. So 7% of that. So if I have max Soul Sparks, I'm getting like 2,800 health every 2 seconds. Not really necessary, but that's like the only beneficial class feature. I don't really like using Dark One's Blessing or Deadly Curse or Warding Curse, and Dust to Dust doesn't work, and Snuff Out is not really good, so I'm not going to explain it. What I was using in the dungeon was Warlock's Bargain and Dread Theft and Soul Scorch. Now, the reason why I use these encounter powers, Warlock's Bargain offers a dot for about 8 seconds, and when you cast it on a target, it can critical, and it can deal like 4,000 or 5,000 damage every second for 8 seconds. And that will just give you some basic lifesteal while that is on the target, so it can keep you alive. So I'd use Warlock's Bargain, then I'd use Dread Theft, and Dread Theft hits all enemies in its path, and you will heal for all the enemies you hit. Now, while those are on targets, they also apply the Hellfire that comes from the Accursed Diabolist set. That also heals you, which is really good because it gives you time to cast your daily and cast Soul Scourge. Now I would use Tyrannical Threat on a target, and what Tyrannical Threat does, you cast it on a target, and whatever damage that target takes, it splits out and hits other enemies. So I would use that and then on a target, and then I would use Soul Scourge, and Soul Scourge splits off, and it does crazy damage because Soul Scourge can critical over 20,000, sometimes over 30,000, and when you use Tyrannical Threat, that 30,000 will split off and hit all enemies around you for crazy amounts of damage. Now, you do not get lifesteal from Tyrannical Threat due to, or contrary to popular belief, you cannot get lifesteal off of Soul Scourge and Tyrannical Threat. And from there we move on to features. Now for my features, I used 3% bonus critical, 3% or 9% bonus hit points, 5% or let's see, 30% more action points when attacking cursed targets with that wills. I don't really notice a difference using that, but I figured why not. Empowered Rituals, 6% more damage, and then I have 1 point in Desperate Restoration. Don't really need it, so I won't explain it. I just don't think Determined Casting with the reduced cooldowns and Shadowfold with reduced slip, I don't think that's really necessary for PvE. And then we get to Devastating Critical, 15% more critical severity, and then 2 points in Blood Pact of Kanya, so you get 2% more bonus damage from Constitution. Now I also have 10 points in Fury. So I have Critical Promise, so whenever you do a critical hit on a target, your next attack will deal 10% of your weapon damage as necrotic damage, which is pretty darn good. And Burning Soul, every Soul Spark you get 0.3% increased damage, so you can have like a bonus of 9% damage or something. Something like that. Or 6%, I don't know, something like that. So it's pretty good damage when you have max Soul Sparks. Also I have Hope Stealer, 2 in Hope Stealer, 3 in Vengeful Curse. You can do any combination of these. You can do 5 and 0. You can do 0 in Vengeful Curse and 5 in Hope Stealer, or 0 in Hope Stealer and 5 in Vengeful Curse. I don't know. I just like to spread those out. And then I have 5 in Vampiric Sparks, where you get 0.05% more lifesteal based on Soul Sparks. I do that because I don't really think Condemned Soul is worth it because it has like an internal cooldown of 40 seconds. So I think a permanent lasting buff is better than a periodic buff. And then I have Aura of Cruelty, where it says allies within 20 feet of you get 5% more lifesteal. I actually think that benefits you as well, so that's really good to use. Also, I don't use Aura of Despair because it says enemies within 20 feet of you deal 5% less damage, because when you are in PvP or you're just standing around, that will proc enemies' Faith Thistle, and that's just more damage you're taking that you don't need to take, so I don't use Aura of Despair. Don't use Darkness because I barely use Blades of Vanquished Armies. Eldritch Momentum is very, very key to this build, to being able to do dungeons solo. If you want a more relaxed playstyle, you can do dungeons solo as a Fury, but it's very, very intense, and it requires more effort. Eldritch Momentum is what basically makes it really easy and simple and laid back. Whenever you take damage, you gain 5% more stamina. So if you're getting hit by archers constantly that don't deal a bunch of damage, you're just getting your stamina, so you can keep slipping around, and you are immune to control when you are slipping. And then soul bonding, not really necessary, but it's good when you do team play dungeons. So yeah, that's the features. Boons really aren't necessary to explain. But what's really nice is if you have completed the Dread Ring campaign, do Endless Consumption, because your lifesteal set has a chance to steal 3 times as much. And I believe when my lifesteal is at its max, I can steal like 20% in the gear that I was using. I could steal 20% of damage as life. So Endless Consumption would do 60%. But yeah. None of the other features are really necessary to go over, and so that's the features, that's the loadout, that's why I used each of the encounter powers, and the only daily I will use is Tyrannical Threat. And let's see, while I was at the boss, some of the key things to notice is that I don't always use Tyrannical Threat. I only use Tyrannical Threat when I am trying to clear mobs of enemies. Now when I was at the boss, what was nice was having the archers, so I could constantly sprint around and cast Warlock's Bargain on the boss, because that will give me the dot damage for lifesteal. So I'd use Warlock's Bargain and then Dread Theft on the boss, and the Dread Theft would hit all enemies, and the Hellfire from the Accursed Diabolus set would proc while I was stationary using Soul Scourge. And Soul Scourge, if you attack a target while it's cursed, it does a damage over time. So if you use those in combination, you're gonna basically be healing yourself constantly, and that is what makes the boss fight for the Dracolich so simple. So that's what it was broken down. Thank you all for watching.